My name's Nevil Hunt. I'm a STEM ambassador, but I also call myself Innovations in Education. And first of all, I'm going to thank all the people that have helped me get this far. There's numerous people, STEM, various schools, organisations, and lots of individuals who've contributed, like Mike, who runs the Raspberry Jam. But what I'm all about is education, right? Have fun while you learn. And I've tried to bring that into what I'm doing with the Raspberry Pi. I've been a STEM ambassador for over a decade now. And in the schools, I've sometimes run maths workshops. I like to get them going with their maths, and I've come up with a little maths game called Number Jumper. And guess what? You're going to have a go at it now. So, to play Number Jumper, shake the dice, or it seems to have landed just like that. And they seem to be all the right way up, the numbers. That was fortunate. Right, to play Number Jumper, choose any two-digit number that's next to each other, in this case 53. You've got to make 53 by multiplying, dividing, adding, subtracting any of the other 7 numbers. So you can make 53 by 9 times 4 plus 2 minus 1. Then you go on to it, you choose any other two-digit number that's next to each other. Now it's your turn. Right, I'm just going to... Right, I'll give you a minute or so. See how many two-digit numbers, and if anyone particularly wants to have a go, choose a 3-digit number. Any 3 digits in a row. You might do 5, 9, 3, and you've got to make that with 2 sevens, a 5, a 6 and a 2. See how you get on. This is where I have to pretend to be Carol Vorderman. I can hear lots of brains whirring. Right, we'll see what anyone's come up with. Anyone want to shout out a two-digit number and how they've made it?
77.
77. How do you make 77?
Got 2 different ways. 9 plus 2.
9 plus 2. Yeah.
That's 11. Times 3 plus 4, which is 7. Yeah, 77.
77. Yes.
Also 6 plus 2, which is 8. Times 9 plus 5.
Right. Anyone else a different number? Any other volunteers? We've got one here.
64.
64.
2 times 7 times 5 minus 6.
Right. Was he right? Was he right? I assume he was right. Anyone did a 3-digit number? No one managed to do a 3-digit. But what I sometimes do is it's the beginning of a class and it gets the children going, it gets their minds working, gets them engaged. And move on to the Raspberry Pi. I wanted to do the same with the Raspberry Pi. because when I went into schools 2 years ago, I got my first Raspberry Pi, and I expected all the children to be fantastically enthusiastic to see this Raspberry Pi. But there was this one lad who just kept putting his hands up and said, "Yes, but what does it do?" And I thought, yeah, well, I know what the Raspberry Pi can do, but to the average school child, when you just see it for the first time, it doesn't appear to do anything. So I thought, I've got to make it do something to gain their interest. And so I went back into work. I'm an electronic engineer, but I work with lots of software engineers, and I said, how did you get interested in writing software? And one of the engineers, one of the best software engineers I've ever worked with, he said, when I was at school, someone showed me a BBC micro and showed that if you plug an LED into the back of the micro, then write a bit of software, you can actually control it. And he said, from that moment, he said, I was hooked. And I thought, LEDs, yes. Flashing LEDs, people like flashing LEDs. And someone else suggested, well, why not make it a 7-segment display? It's more than just an LED. Once you've done an LED and you switched it on and switched it off, you want to be able to do a little bit more. So 7-segment display. And had to think, well, what can you do with just 7 segments? And I came up with the 7 segments of Pi, which I call possibly the simplest games console in the world, because it has one control button, just one push button, and the display is a 7-segment display. But with that, and a bit of ingenuity, to be surprised just how much you can do. So this is your next task. That's a 7-segment display, and conventionally the segments are given those letters. I want you to work out which segments need to be on and which segments need to be off for the number 4. Anyone manage that? Be surprised how people think 4. Yeah, which ones are on and which ones are off? Anyone going to nominate? Is A on or off? Off. Off. Yeah. So in Python we make that false. Is B on or off? On. On. C on or off? On. D. Off. So false. E. Off. False. F. So 4 looks like that. So the 7 segments of Pi is based around working out which segments to make numbers. I need to. Sorry, this is not my. I have a video to show. Here we are. So this is the 7 segments of Pi. How do we do the sound thing?
No idea, I'm afraid. No idea.
Oh, right. I don't
Just
know.
turn the volume up on the PC, hopefully people can hear it.
Right. I don't know whether you'll be able to hear this. Is there a volume control?
Well, there's a slider just bottom left,
Yeah,
right a
just
bit.
to the right there.
Slide it along.
Fun audio learning to 7 segments.
Fight against it.
Segments of Pi is an electronic kit which attaches to your Raspberry Pi to create what may be the simplest games console in the world. This is a games console designed to run software with Raspberry. First, you must set up your kit. Then attach it to your Raspberry Pi. Plug in the SD card provided with the kit, and now you're ready to start programming. challenge is to make it act as a dice, a high dice. Your second software challenge is to make it act as a stopwatch, a Phi stopwatch. Now you'll have the software skills needed to write your first computer game, VGA Adapters. Could this be your first step in becoming the next generation computer games designer?
I don't know whether you could hear that. Did the sound come across?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Wrong button. Stop. You can tell it wasn't rehearsed. Right, so 7 segments of pi. First of all, you make it act as a dice, a pi dice. And in doing that, you learn how to use GPIO's inputs, GPIO's outputs, time delays, and random numbers. Then, add to that, making it work as a stopwatch, a pi stopwatch. And from that, you learn how to add sound effects and state machines. And added together, you have the skills to write your first computer game, Figure 8 My Pi, which use GPIO's inputs, GPIO's outputs, time delays, random numbers, sound effects, and state machines. Now, I took this into schools to run as workshops, and the first thing I heard when I showed Raspberry Pis in schools is it's got HDMI output, but all our monitors are VGA. Most schools don't realise that you can get VGA adapters. You don't have to buy HDMI monitors. But there are problems with these. They're not all the same. And in particular, some of them don't route the sound correctly. So I've been doing a series of articles for Mike about my experiences in the classroom, and I've put some notes in there about the problems with these VGA adapters and how they affect the sound. So you might want to have a look. If you're going to make use of sound, then have a look at that and try and get the right VGA adapter. 7 segments of pi is a kit, so it needs soldering. Not all schools are geared up to do soldering, but if you can, it adds a new dimension to the Raspberry Pi. You've actually made your own bit of electronics to attach to the Raspberry Pi. The next thing I found was that the Raspberry Pi software keeps changing, and it works differently with different monitors. About this time last year, the Raspberry Pi Foundation recognised this and came out with Noobs, and this solves so many of the problems of working with different monitors, different types. So for the 7 segments of Pi, I provide the SD card with it, so it works exactly as in the instructions. So I've done it as a custom Noobs, which means that at the end of a term, when you've finished this activity, you can just clear the SD card and it goes back to how it started the term. You don't have to reprogram all the cards. I've added the instruction manuals on the SD card, so it's immediately available. I've put desktop shortcuts, and I've also enabled remote login, so you can take backups of students' work from a central PC. So they're all features I've added to the standard operating system just to make it a little bit easier to use in the classroom. Now, when I ran the workshop in schools, one of the things I was particularly keen was that the students had their own Raspberry Pi, if possible, at home, and they could carry on working when they got home. So I gave them each an SD card. But if you look at the SD card, what are the chances of it actually arriving home? They'll sneeze, take the handkerchief out, and then their SD card and all their work will go with it. So I got them all one of these. It's a SD card keyring and a little climbing clip, and the Pi Hut now have these on sale. If you're giving your students their own SD card, which I would encourage because it allows them to carry on working at home, then these are not a bad idea. Now, I wanted to give the students a bit of freedom to do something slightly different. So I gave them a task of doing a stopwatch, and I said, well, you can just create a stopwatch and get it to count from 0 to 9. We've only got one digit, 0 to 9, and one student said to me, I'm going to make mine count to 10. I said, well, you've only got one digit. Once you get to 9, how are you going to do it? And he said, I'm going to do it. And so I said, okay. About 15 minutes later, he called me over and said, I've made it count to 10. And what he'd done is he made it display that, and he said, I'll turn it round. And he had made 10. And he had realised that he had individual control over each of the segments. It wasn't limited to just normal numbers that you display on it, so he was able to make it count to 10. And that was a wonderful moment because it showed that they were understanding what it was about and thinking of ideas of their own. Now, I like the idea of having fun while you learn, and so I came up with a game that you can play on the 7 segments called Figure 8 My Pi. And the way I came up with that, I was thinking about my scale-electric set, how I originally had an oval and got some extra pieces and was able to make a figure 8. So I thought a single segment going round the outside, it could then go round in a figure 8. And then with a push button, if you hit the push button while it's going across the middle segment, you've created a little game. So if you get the chance, come out and have a game of Figure 8 My Pi on my stand outside. The other thing, I gave the student the chance to add sound effects. There's lots of sound effects included on the SD card, but several students went off and made their own sound effects using the program Audacity. And this is one of my group of students having completed the 7 segments of Pi challenge and proudly displaying their 7 segments of Pi boards. We're down to the last minute, aren't we? Yeah. Right, very quickly, you're only going to get 30 seconds on this. I then thought, is 7 segments of Pi the end? No, I had new ideas, but just like that, when I had my numbers game, I thought, well, why not do fractions instead of just numbers? So here, 10 seconds. Can anyone, any 3 fractions multiplied to get, can you make an equation out of any 3 fractions that equate? So a half times a quarter equals an eighth. Anyone else?
Quarter times 6 is a 24th.
Quarter times 6. Good one, yes, right. I was going to give you a couple of minutes to do that one, but moving on. So my follow-up to the 7 segments of Pi is called the Pi Troll, and it's a simple games controller in the shape of the Greek letter Pi, where you have a joystick on the left and various buttons on the right, and use it to control your own games, download games from Pygame, modify them. So I'll provide instructions as to how you get it to use the GPIO instead of the keyboard. And with the front cover on, it will look something like that. Then this would be really cool if I asked you to do that. I had the same thing with the numbers game, where for my A-level students I came up with a trig version of Number Jumper, and this one makes my brain ache as well. Try and equate any of those, any 3 of those together. That's sine, I think sine of pi by 6 is, anyone know? Is it a half?
It's a half.
Yes. That is hard work, that one. But in the same way, for 7 segments, I thought, well, I've got 7 segments, I've got the Pi Troll. I've got a third one called Pidapter. Now, Pidapter is an adapter for the P1 connector that allows you to connect 2 Pi Trolls, so you can write 2-player games. And because both Pi Trolls use the same GPIO, it has to adapt them, so you choose which GPIO are used for the 2 controllers. So that's the 7 segments of Pi and its follow-on products. Any questions?
How much does the kit cost?
The 7 segments of Pi kit is on sale at the moment at £20, and that includes the SD card that goes with it. Any more? Right, thank you very much.